professor of bioengineering at the University of Utah and a self-identified atheist. His present research focuses on restoring motor and sensory function after spinal cord injury or hand amputation. And we are privileged to have him speak to us today on Mind, Brain, and God, are science and religion compatible? We have put the link to Dr. Clark's abstract, which has a bunch of further links to related information on science, religion, education, and neural engineering. And so if you go to our website and you want to read up some more, you can click on those links. Please welcome Dr. Clark.
Thank you, Angie. Thank all of you. As Angie sort of implied, she's about to release the Kraken. It may not be fitting for the Birkenstock hockey crowd here, but science and religion, are they compatible? No. Questions? Okay, we're done. Coffee time. Yeah. So here's the thing. Why not? Well, for one, science works and religion doesn't. Right? And that's what pops into many people's mind. But it's really deeper than that. And it's that second part I want to focus on. Science is not simply a collection of facts. It's a method. It's a method for understanding our universe and replacing it. And it's a method that is inherently mutually exclusive with the method of religion. And as a consequence, religion is risible, it is repugnant, and it's deeply dishonest to its very core. The world is better off without it. So before getting into that, let's pause for a moment and think about what science is, and we'll make you all scientists, all right? Let's play I have a hypothesis. Right? We got a bunch of experiments you can do, and your hypothesis is this. The card is a vowel on one side that has an even number on the other side. So you, in fact, reality isn't known through reason alone. It's not. It's not. Okay? All deductive arguments build everything into the premise. You've got to go out there and you've got to do experiments. You can't sit there in your armchair. So you've got to do an experiment to find out whether this is true. Reason alone can't do this. So the question is, what card or cards should you turn over to test your hypothesis, or this hypothesis? Okay, I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. Step out a little. In the interest of time, we'll move right along. Hope you made your choices. Write them down, because otherwise you'll lie to yourself. And, oh yeah, I was going to turn it over, but oh yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. People often turn over 4. If you turned over 4, you shouldn't have. It got you no new information. And every experiment costs you. It costs you time, it costs you money. Many people fail to turn over 7, but they should. That's like a really super key card, because if it's E, your hypothesis is false, and you have disconfirmed your hypothesis. What we do as human beings is we seek confirmation, we look for 4, even though it's irrelevant, and we fail to turn over 7. We fail to turn over 7, routinely, statistically. So what is science? Science isn't simply a collection of facts, it's a method for determining empirical reality. And if you know anything about science, you know we have control groups in every experiment. What's a control group? A control group is an attempt to prove yourself wrong. To prove yourself wrong. To look for a better explanation than your favorite hypothesis. It's an attempt to shoot yourself down. If you can't shoot yourself down, well, it's the best we got so far. It's the best we've got so far. But you try to prove yourself wrong, which is the very opposite of religion, which is to take everything on faith. Okay, so are they compatible? No. Science works, religion doesn't. The methods are inherently incompatible. Science depends on honesty. Religion depends on lies and delusions and continually stream of lame excuses. It's deeply dishonest. And every theist knows this and is afraid to admit it. And I don't respect that. I can respect some theists because we're compartmentalizing people. Right? You're indoctrinated, but I don't respect religion, and it deserves no respect. Science, it works. Cured smallpox. Used to be 300 to 500 million deaths in the last century. That's a lot of people. Religion fails. Every time. It has never cured anything. Ever. Ever. Right? Everybody knows this. Right? Marshall Brink, why won't God heal amputees? Cut off a limb, it will never grow back no matter how hard you play. You can see, everybody in the world can see this with their naked eyes. It's also deeply repugnant to claim that God cures cancer and hates amputees, never cures a single one of them. He finds your car keys, he throws your touchdown pass for your help. But the amputees, fuck them, never. That's wrong, right? Religion discovered nothing. They can never produce knowledge. It's revealed nothing. Think of the Bible. There's not a single sentence of St. Harris said. Not one sentence in the whole damn Bible that says anything that the ignorant peoples of millennia ago couldn't say, that you couldn't see with your naked eye. Not one sentence. And this is wisdom. Some big questions. Who created the universe? Who created people? Or what created people? Where does consciousness come from? Is there life after death? Science is beginning to crack these big questions that were once the domain of religion alone, even though religion got all the answers wrong. Right? And what do people say? God did it. That's a non-answer. That's a non-answer. That answer, which can explain everything, explains nothing. Right? Doesn't work, right? You notice Sidney Harris cartoon? I think you need to be more explicit here in step 2 than miracle occurs. No! That's not science. Just do that stuff. And scientists don't sit around and go, oh, okay, reveal to me whether this drug works or that drug works. Yeah, all right, let's just review the Bible. We'll just get started, right? In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. This is the first sentence of the Bible. It's wrong, right? We now know that the universe was almost 14 billion years ago, made 14 billion years ago. The Earth was like 4.5 billion years ago. They're off by almost 10 billion years, and that's the first sentence. And it goes downhill from there, right? And this is so self-evident that anybody could possibly believe this without lying to themselves, without lying to you, is incredible. Even a fifth grader knows that you don't have fruit trees growing before the sun and stars existed, unlike what the Bible says. We didn't even have the atoms that make up trees or the earth, right? But it gets worse, right? Because according to the Bible, there was day and night before there was the sun and the stars. Really, that's what it says, right? We're taking wisdom from a group of people who didn't know where the sun went at night. Think about that. Right? Even a fifth grader knows that snakes and donkeys don't talk. It's Disneyland stuff, right? But, the Lord opened the mouth of the ass and said unto Balaam, yeah, so at least we have proof that God is talking through his ass, right? You took the children out, right? Even a fifth grader knows that earthquakes are not caused by God being mad at the gay or who's using which restroom, right? Even a fifth grader knows, unlike the governor, whoops, no, we don't have an empty office, thank you. Even a fifth grader knows that, you can't quench Texas wildflowers with prayer. It's as effective as dehydrated water. Even a fifth grader knows that God doesn't guide lightning bolts to strike the wicked. Now, you may think I'm inventing a straw man, but keep this image in mind for later in the talk. Even a fifth grader knows that zombies are imaginary, yet the central tenet of Christianity is a zombie story. And it's not just Jesus who got up, it's many people got up, and they came up and they appeared unto many. Right? This is nonsense. No reasonable person can believe this stuff. Right? We all know zombies eat you, the central message of Christianity and communion, and you eat the zombie. Or in short, fight me. Fifth graders know the Bible's nonsense. It can't be explained as a metaphor, which is one of the lies that the religious tell, right, for a lot of reasons. One is if you chop down your God to doing nothing by making it all metaphor, you're not left with your God. But even more deeply, the central stories are as risible and as ridiculous as are the things that they like to mock for the tinfoil hat creationists. God isn't omniscient. He's dumber than a fifth grader. And yet, by their own account, he's still infinitely smarter than they are. For once, I'll accept their judgment. All right, so let me put this in a context of moderate theism. Creation and evolution, right? We know that, in fact, in the United States, there's groups, religious groups, that reject evolution. 22% of Mormons accept evolution. That's horrendous. The United States is like way down at the bottom of the world list of people who believe in evolution. But it's worse. It's worse than those figures imply because religion theists are so ashamed of their religion that they lie about it. So the Pope, for example, says evolution and Big Bang Theory are real. God's not a wizard. Well, that's nonsense. He doesn't really believe in evolutionary theory, and he does think God's a wizard, right? It's magic stuff. The supernatural and natural explanations are inherently incompatible. Evolution, scientific evolution, is a theory that's an explanation, and there is no wizard. This guy says there is, but he's ashamed of it. He courts respectability, and I'm not buying that bullshit. Right? And it's a big heap of bullshit, let me tell you. Because, in fact, if you look at the demographics, yeah, there's the crazy tinfoil hat creationists, right? 42% of people say that, that the world was created, people were created de novo by God, not coming from other species, right? And moderate theists mock those people as being, just not realistic. And they pat themselves on the back, but they believe in God-guided evolution. Yeah, they accept that different species exist, but God guided the process. We're not here by accident. We're God's children, right? Right? So you're left with under 20% who actually believe in evolution. And what gets my goat is these moderates are basically saying, well, my shit don't stink, right? This is all crazy stuff. But my magic man in the sky who created this, well, that's respectable. That's intellectually respectable. No, it's not. Right? And the fundamentals of your religion are wrong. Your religion is fundamentally wrong. Okay? So let's think about this, right? Claiming in God-guided, we all laughed at this, God throwing and guiding thunderbolts. But God-guided revolution is the intellectual equivalent, right? It's saying there was an intervening supernatural entity that was doing stuff to manipulate the world. If you laugh at creationists and you're a moderate theist, you're a hypocrite because your crazy-ass stuff is just as crazy. It's like laughing at someone for using the magic 8-ball when you use the Ouija board, right? Does not compute. All right, brains. Now we get to some of my stuff. Yes, can some science stuff say about this? Yes, it can. Religion says the soul's indivisible. Our souls are incorporeal. They're not part of our body. Science says something different. It says the mind very much is divisible. Our different parts of our brain do very, very different things, and we're not aware of many of them. All aspects of consciousness and cognition are subject to physical manipulation. We can change who you are by changing your brain. Try going to the judge sometime and say, it's true my blood alcohol level was, 3%, but my soul was sober, that was just my body. No one would think of that as being a credible argument. And yet that is what theism is basically claiming. Okay? What happens if you replace all of these body parts, the hip, the kidney, a lung, the heart? You're still the same person, but you replace the brain, right? And you're a fundamentally different person. So in fact, that's happened in part. Phineas Gage is one of these well-known first neurological cases. He was a well-tempered foreman with lots of planning, and he was tamping down dynamite with a tamping iron. And yeah, guess what happened, right? The dynamite blew up, and it blew this tamping pole right through his frontal cortex. And amazingly, he survived, and his intelligence was reasonably normal, but his personality was drastically changed. Right? His colleagues said his mind was so radically changed, so decidedly so, that his friends and acquaintances said he was no longer Gage. Change the brain, change the person. You can do the opposite, which instead of blowing things up, you can stimulate them and activate them. So we can do this in the human brain. Here's a telling example of mice done with this new technique called optogenetics that I won't go into, but you stimulate with light rather than electricity. Put a female mouse in with a male mouse, and sure enough, the action happens. No children here, right? But they're getting friendly, right? You turn on and activate part of the brain that activates aggression, and now this male mouse that used to be making love is now making war. That's a fundamental shift. It comes from stimulating the brain. Some of you know that you have your two hemispheres connected by a large group of fibers called the corpus callosum. What happens when you split them? You end up with two hemispheres that don't communicate very well. You end up with almost two different personalities, and at the very least, you end up with two brains that have different experiences. Okay, that don't know very much about it. This is well known and easily. So what happens if your right hand shoots somebody and your left hand tries to stop them? Who goes to hell? Who goes to heaven? Right? You're all in one body. You are a product of your brain. And just for fun, you don't have conscious awareness of all the parts that go on in your brain. Go to the New York Times and play this game of rock, paper, scissors against a naive computer. You will lose. You will lose. Think about what this means. This means that you are being controlled by something of which you have no conscious awareness, because if you knew what you were going to do, what would you do? And the computer could predict you perfectly, what would you do? You'd switch. Right? So you think you know what you're going to do, so you switch, and the computer outpredicts your switching based on what you've done in the past. You don't know what's controlling your behavior. But your brain is. You just don't have conscious awareness. So is there life after death? No. Can science speak to this? Yes. I hate it. It drives me crazy when people say, well, you've never been dead, so you don't know. What science does is predict the future. I don't know. There's no experience I've ever had that if I take a certain drug that it will work, and yet doctors prescribe it all the time, right? Science predicts the future. And everything we know about brain science and everything we know about the laws of physics says there is no life after death, right? And every book that's ever been written about there being life after death from these near-death experiences, like this one, Heaven is Real, highlighted in Newsweek Group of Heaven, has proven to be empty or a deliberate fraud. So he claimed during my coma my brain wasn't working improperly, it wasn't working at all. That's the claim in the book. But when pushed, and when his doctors got asked, he said, well, the thing is, I wouldn't say it was completely inactive. Take away that claim and you take away everything his book is all about, except the $4 million he made, right? My favorite is there was a book by a kid, did you see this one?
Yeah.
His last name was Malarkey. I'm not making this up. Okay? So you can actually put this to science, right? So the idea is you have this near-death experience and you float up out of your body and you look down on the doctors in the surgery room, right? You've heard this story, right? And then you see something beautiful and it's all warm and fuzzy, God's beautiful. Nothing that a Hallmark card writer couldn't write without going there, right? But here's the thing. You look down on the surgery, you should be able to see what's there. So they did this very large-scale experiment with over 1,000 patients who were about to go into coronary arrest, who did go into coronary arrest. They're in the OR or they're elsewhere in the hospital, and they've got figures on shelves that no one could see from below. So these people float up and they come back and they say they saw this. Not one out of those 1,000 people saw the figures that they would have seen if their experience were real. Not one. Right? And yet the press trumpets it as brain awareness continuing after shutdown. False. Yes, they report hallucinations of seeing lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! But they don't report what's really there in the environment. Hallucinations are real, but they're not a real reflection of reality. Just the opposite is true, and this is relevant to my work. If we can create brain activity, then you will experience that brain activity as being a sensory stimulus, even if in the real world that sensory stimulus is there. And that's the whole idea behind the matrix, right? You stimulate the gustatory cortex and activate the neurons that are normally activated by the flavor of steak, and what do you experience? The flavor of steak, right? So on the self-evident, intercessory prayer always fails. Always. Always. Not once in the history of the universe has it ever worked. Right? This is strikingly self-evident when you come to this obvious ability to look like healing an amputee. Right? So Marshall Brain has a wonderful website, Why Won't God Heal Amputees? He's written a book. And you just don't. Right? And the reason God doesn't heal amputees is the same reason Superman doesn't stop crime, is he's imaginary.
Right, it's Batman.
Oh, sorry. All right, so we work with amputees, right? We don't work with Batman, but we do work with amputees. This is Matthew Beckstead. Bad electrical accidents, stay away from electricity, folks. He wakes up, no hands, neither hand, bilateral amputee. So how do you hold a fork? How do you tie your shoes? How do you play the guitar? How do you tickle your kid? Right? And how do you feel? Very high-tech Band-Aid, Our approach is to take a bunch of electrodes and stick them in the nerve. The nerves are still there and the nerves still work. So when a person, and we also put electrodes in the remaining muscles. Right? A lot of the hand muscles are actually in the forearm, in case you don't know. Right? Make a fist and you can feel your muscles moving. Right? So he thinks about moving, the signal comes down the nerves, we capture those with our electrodes, we decode them, we translate them, and he thinks about moving and the artificial hand actually moves. Going the other way, if we activate the sensory fibers going back to the central nervous system in the brain, he will feel his missing hand, just as he would if it were the biological sensors that were activating it instead of our electrical stimulus. And if any of you know the cochlear prosthesis, you know that we can restore hearing to the profoundly deaf just that way. Right? This is a body version of the cochlear prosthesis. And we want to put it together for closed loop control. So can we do this? Yes, we can. Right? This soul, this person, this consciousness is accessible to us by activating the proper fibers. So what you're about to see here is for the first time, he's going to reach out and touch this door with his virtual hand in a virtual reality environment. Okay? Now we've stimulated these sensory neurons before, and we know that he feels on these sensory neurons. But you're about to see, and you'll have to listen carefully, his reaction when he's the one moving the hand for the first time and touching the door for the first time.
Oh my God, you're supposed to work.
Notice how he flinches back. It's real. Oh my gosh, my hand's alive again.
Oh yeah.
Can you feel the finger sliding when you do that?
Yeah, actually I can. Bring it on her. God, it's so cool.
There's no door there.
God did it.
That's right. Actually, people compartmentalize. Some of the students that work with me are deeply religious. You can be religious and a good scientist, except you have to do it by throwing away your religion while you're doing the science, right? And when he shows this video, he actually feels like he has to cross that word out because it's offensive. True story. All right. We do musical numbers here, so we can do music. You record the neural signals. They move the VRE hand, the virtual reality hand. They play a virtual reality Wii guitar, actually a real Wii guitar, and then that plays music. So you're about to see his debut performance of Smoke on the Water. So this is being done with a neural myoelectric decode, and every time you see the note explode, he hits the key at the right time. And young people understand what this is all about. Old people, talk to your kids. Boom, 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 boom. Right, so we can do this. All right, so how do we know? This is the epistemological question. Science versus faith. Right? If someone were to say, well, I asked the magic 8 ball, right, you'd get the wrong answer. The problem isn't that you get the wrong answer sometimes. What's the real problem? The real problem is relying on the magic 8 ball to begin with, right? And the other problem is all the lying it takes for you to convince yourself that the magic 8 ball is actually working, because it doesn't. Right? So in science, faith is considered a vice. Right? You look for evidence, you try to prove stuff wrong. In religion, faith is considered a virtue. These are incompatible, mutually exclusive worldviews. Comment by Jerry Coyne. Religion is just the opposite. It says, doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith. What a horrible way to live your world. Horrible not just in that it gets the answers wrong, but a horrible state of mind to be in. Right? What would change your mind? Ask a theist. Right? Bill Nye says, evidence. Yeah, it's based on evidence. Ken Ham says, nothing. Right? And we'll follow that. And that's not unusual. So here's a meme that you may have seen, right? You do all of this stuff, you can't change my mind. What an awful point of view. Yes, in science, where certain can be about certain things. Okay? We know the Earth is not a flat plane. All right? There's a 0.00001% chance we're wrong. And if we really were shown evidence that we were wrong, we'd accept it. Okay. All right, let's think about this. What if a doc said, this is a universal poison anecdote. Antidote. It works every single time. What would you say as a reasonable person? Oh, that's cool. Show me. Show me. And the doc says to you, oh, you know what? Whenever you test it, then it stops working. What would be your honest assessment of this person? They're a quack, right? They're a quack. And yet this is the central tenet of Christianity, that Jesus says, if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not harm them if they're a believer. I say, show me. And there's not one Christian I've ever met that is willing to take that test, that is willing to show that the words of Christ are true, because they know they're wrong. They know that this is nothing but hooey. And it's the constant excuses and making exceptions, like, oh, well, as soon as you test it, then God, doesn't go along with the game. That's nonsense. It's a problem. So you may think that, I'm just using straw man, silly fundies, but it's not just the fundamentals. It's the same essential process in moderate theism. It's every Christian and every Mormon, and it's not just about metaphors, it's about the real world. Anybody know who this is? Sierra Newbold. Kids here may want to leave, or may not. We're talking about true Christianity, and it's repulsive. So imagine her father, her real-world father, watched as this 6-year-old is kidnapped, watched as she's being raped, watched as she's being beaten, watched as she's being killed, and did nothing. Nothing. Imagine her screams. Imagine her prayers. And he does nothing. Imagine, after the event is over, he does intervene to catch her killer rapist because he didn't want to interfere with his free will. Who in their right mind would do that as a father? Who in their right mind would praise that that father is doing the right thing? And the answer is every Christian and every Mormon would make that statement, so long as we're talking about the perfect Father, which is God in heaven, our Father. He sat and watched kiddie snuff porn rather than intervene, even though he could have. There's only two answers to the question, why didn't he intervene? One is he couldn't have, and the second is he was unwilling. Every Christian and every Mormon claims, number one, that he was willing, that he was able, but unwilling, and that he did the right thing. That's not true. And you know it, and everybody knows it, and that's an example of the deep dishonesty of Christianity and Mormonism. And in fact, it even showed up in the newspaper, right? Divine intervention helped the police solve this case after the fact. The policeman got a message from God saying who the killer was. Right? And yet not a comment like, wait a minute, how come he didn't intervene earlier? All he had to do was tell mom and dad down the hall that she's being kidnapped, and it could have been done. All these presidential candidates, God's talking to me, didn't say a word to her parents. That's repugnant. And it's deceitful. So some of you may know Aya Hershey Ali, her comments on turning from a Muslim to an atheist. I couldn't be honest with others unless I was honest with myself. I had had enough of lying. The only position that leaves me with no cognitive dissonance is atheism. It's the only position that is not lying to yourself. So what do I care what other people think? Well, one of the three things that was mentioned here was education, right? Well, I'm an educator, right? I'm an educator. So what I'm told constantly is I should promote critical thinking and lifelong learning. That it's not just teaching what to think, but how to think, right? That truth matters. That seeking knowledge and understanding is a virtue in and of itself. And yet when we come to religion, what was God's first commandment? Do not partake of the tree of knowledge or I will punish you. This is the antithesis of critical thinking. So why did you become a scientist? I love this quote from Insular Rabbi, who's a Nobel Prize winner in physics. An answer that will warm the hearts of parents ever read. My mother made me a scientist without ever intending it. Every other Jewish mom in Brooklyn would ask her child after school, so, did you learn anything today? Right? Facts. But not my mother. always ask me a different question. Izzy, she would say, did you ask a good question to me? Did you ask a good question to me? And that difference, asking good questions, that's what made me become a scientist. Right? So I leave you with this quote from Alfred Lord Tennyson's Ulysses, which I think is a virtue. To follow knowledge like a sinking star, beyond the utmost bound of human thought. Come, my friends, it is not too late to seek a newer world. A world that's a better world. A world without religion. So thank you for your attention and bon voyage.